We'd like to welcome all of our participants in today's webinar on the 6 elements of leadership. And especially a great welcome to our speakers. We have Conny Montague and Anne Wood. Conny is the chair of BPW International Task Force on Leadership and Lifelong Learning, and Anne is a longtime and active member of that task force. Both of them are also authors of the Leadership Training for Women program within that task force, and have given the training in a number of places in our BPW community. So we want to welcome them, thank them in advance for their wonderful words to us. We thank those again who have joined us in person for this live webinar and participating in the discussion portion, which will come after the speakers. And we also thank in advance our viewers around the world. So without further ado, ladies, I want to give the floor over to you, our speakers. And thank you, and again, welcome to everyone.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Anne, for inviting us to do this webinar. Connie and I are delighted to be able to share with all of you some of the content of the BPW Leadership Training for Women. And this training was put together by BPW members who are coaches and trainers, and it's been offered throughout Europe. So we'll tell you a little bit more about it after the webinar. Of course, we won't be able to do it all because the training itself is offered over 2 days, and it has 3 modules: you as a leader, you with your team, and you and the organization. And so it has lots of role plays and exercises and sharing information and much more. But we hope that you will come away with at least being familiar with some of the content and what it has to offer. So let's get started. I'll pass it over now to Connie.
Thank you very much, Anne. I would also like to say hello. I just checked the list of participants. I know a few people. Great to have you here. And if we look at the next slide, Anne. Can we? Yes. So you can see a whole pile of books, and you know that there are zillion books and articles and webinars and seminars all about leadership. We have about 50 minutes. So we decided we are going to concentrate on 6 elements. The 6 elements of leadership that probably help you to reflect a little. Where do I stand? Which element do I cover totally? Where do I have to maybe put some focus? And what we also would like to do is we would like to have a look at both the corporate world, but also leadership in a volunteer world, and of course also particularly if you have a leadership role in a BPW club or organization. So that's our focus today.
Our objectives: learn more about leadership, understand better your own leadership journey, and reflect on what you need to develop your leadership skills to successfully continue on your career path.
So the very word is always used all the time. What is leadership all about? And we chose a definition. You can see the quote here. For us, leadership is a process. And that means it's not something that is stagnant. It's something that is organic. Sometimes you lead more, sometimes you lead less, but it's definitely a process that you need to understand and adapt to. It involves influence. The influence goes from the leader to the group, but also from the group back to the leader, which is the next central component, the group as such. Leadership is not only grand scale CEO, political leader, but also in small groups, small clubs, small volunteer organizations, small teams, startups, families, all of those groups. And it always involves a common goal, because if there's no common goal, you don't actually need a leader. So this is what we understand the central elements of leadership to be. And that's what we want to take into our focus today.
So what we'll share with you today are the 6 elements of the leadership compass. It's a model that has 6 elements: vision, communication, drive or motivation, control, situational awareness, and self-awareness. And we're going to use the example of the captain of a boat or the leader of a boat to kind of illustrate how these elements are used in your leadership journey.
So the first thing that the captain of a boat needs is vision. The captain needs to know where to go. You can see all these fabulous nautical instruments here. You can see the binoculars, you can see the compass. That is something that a team or a crew expects the leader to know. Where are we actually going? What is our port of destination? And it's very important that the group has this compelling vision as to why are we doing all of this and where does it finally lead us. And I would like to show you in the next slide a couple of well-known visions. You know that almost everybody, every company has a vision. I just take out two. Tesla, for example, the transition to sustainable energy, very strong. You know exactly where you're going when you work for Tesla, or when you're a customer, you know where they are going. Or IKEA, it's another company that we all know, to create a better world for everyone. It's also a very, very compelling vision. And the one in the middle is one of the oldest, and it is actually by Walt Disney himself, to make people happy. So that was his compass, that was his vision. I also put on the slide the international theme of BPW. You may all know that we also have a vision. Every 3 years it is reformulated, and at the moment, till the end of, till August actually, empowering women to realize sustainable development goals is actually our vision. And maybe just to remind all of us of what the sustainable development goals actually are, I put them together on the next slide. You may remember that this is the one thing that all countries in the UN unanimously agreed on. So it's quite an achievement. So if you look at the 17 goals, we as the task force have number 4, quality education, and number 5, gender equality as our vision. And this is how we work. This is what we try to put into activities, into practice. That's what guides us. And I also took the example of BPW Malta in the next slide, because they took out 8 of these sustainable development goals and also put them in a very, very clear vision, which guides all of their activities and their principles. So these are just 2 examples of BPW and how the vision is translated into something really concrete. Then in the next slide, I would like to summarize quickly for you what a strong vision means. First of all, as a leader, if you want to develop a vision, it needs to be future-oriented. Remember the captain with the compass. So it needs to show a goal, it has to have movement, and there needs to be growth. The second thing that a strong vision needs is, it needs to be positive. We have to focus on the possibilities and on the solutions, not on the risks, on the possibilities and on the solutions. Point number 4, means it is inclusive. If you as a leader develop a vision or translate a vision into action, it's extremely important that everybody in your team, no matter what the age, the gender, the skill, the ethnic background, no matter who it is, there has to be a meaningful and important role for everybody in your team. And the last point that I would like to mention is a vision needs to be active. It shouldn't be something which is kind of written on a poster in the lobby of the company, but it needs to be active and it needs to be kept alive all the time by the leader through action, discussion, many other things. And I would like to close this bit on vision by looking at vision in a volunteer organization. So as a leader in a volunteer organization, we feel that you have to communicate the vision to the members. If we can just have a look at that, because very often the members are not entirely aware. So if I think of club level here in Germany, not everybody is aware what the general vision of BPW International actually is. So a leader needs to make the members aware. Then the next point is that if you are a leader, you have to be a role model. So if the vision is clear, you have to be a role model for the vision, because otherwise it's not really very convincing. And the last point is you have to have meaningful activities and meaningful events and meaningful action that actually supports the vision. So that's what we thought is an important element that you need as a leader. That was the first of the 6 elements. And Anne is going to continue and talk to you about the second.
So leadership requires not only a clear vision, but also the ability to communicate it effectively, outside and inside your group, because without effective communication, it's impossible for groups and organizations to make the decisions necessary to reach their targets. So a captain who has a clear vision of the destination is able to communicate that vision to his team, to his crew, in order to reach the destination. So in order to communicate effectively, there are 3 basic rules. Listen to others, speak with clarity, and foster open dialogue. Sounds simple, right? I'm sure you've all heard these before, but it's really important to keep in mind. And some of it takes effort. Speaking with clarity, for example, maybe practicing your speaking, but some of it is just knowing what they are and staying focused. But in addition to these general rules about communication, we as women sometimes have to think about how we're perceived, or how we may, or men may, behave differently from us. For example, research shows that women are in a double bind. They may talk nice. If you talk nice, you're not seen as competent. But if you talk competent, you may be seen as not nice. Don't be afraid to disagree. It's not necessary that everyone likes you. It's not necessary to always be nice and supportive, but just to be assertive and competent, not submissive, and also not to get aggressive. Here's a model of vertical and horizontal communication that can illustrate some of the differences between men and women. They may be stereotypes, but it's still something to keep in mind. So men tend to communicate vertically. They're more status-oriented. The communication flows from the superiors to the subordinates in a downward way. Women, however, tend to communicate horizontally. They're more content-oriented. They're more focused on relationships and common ground. So have you ever been, no, first we'll start with the meetings, the meeting game, okay? You know, it's often a place where you need to think about how meetings can be run, especially mixed gender meetings. For example, generally, when it's a male-dominated meeting, ranking comes before content. So number 1 is the most important and powerful person. The first 10 to 15 minutes in meetings are often for clarifying the ranking. So maybe there's no content in this ranking phase. You either stay out of the game or you play the game. But if you want to play the game, always speak to number 1 and convince him or her. Don't try to convince or involve the others. Number 1 is the most important and is going to make the final decision. Have you ever been in a meeting when you've made a suggestion that was ignored or picked up by a man or someone else who takes ownership of the idea? Well, here's an idea about how to combat this. Okay, we are not moving. There we go. So if someone steals your ideas, you can say, "Thank you, Mr. So-and-so, for repeating my proposal." And then you continue to argue to number 1. Sometimes men repeat the same content several times, and it's not because of the content. It's to get a word in edgewise, to be noticed, to improve your ranking. And then if you find there are some nonstop speakers, you deal with it like passing in front of a car. You take the first opportunity or breathing space to jump in immediately and put forward your ideas. So here's some tips to be more confident when you're in meetings. Be prepared for the first round of positioning. Know your goal. Believe in your ideas and have confidence in sharing them. My clicker is not behaving. Use your body language. Don't be afraid to say something wrong. Don't be afraid of conflicts. And finally, offer to take the next steps. Be active and dynamic. Sometimes men and women have different conversational rituals. Men can tease each other about status or about the ranking. And sometimes they just like to oppose, explore ideas, play devil's advocate. So our advice is don't let your idea down and don't take this personally. Women often tend to apologize. I still find that with a lot of my clients. I'm sorry that happened. And if it happens over and over again, then it becomes a disadvantage to you're seen as not competent. Sometimes men and women give orders differently. Men can tell what to do directly. It's not impolite. Women tend to be more indirect. I would, could you, maybe. And the risk is that you might get a no, or you might appear too uncertain. So communication in volunteer organizations, I mean, it basically follows the same principles. You need to send updates and newsletters to members to keep them in the loop. You need to make it a point to talk to your members at meetings. You need to encourage feedback from members. And finally, have regular meetings with your board members. It's important that they know what's going on and that you keep them motivated and in the loop and feeling involved in the organization. So that's basically the second element, communication. Connie, back to you.
Thank you very much. So we had to look now at where we're going, and we had to look at communication with some pitfalls, communication pitfalls that women sometimes face. And now we want to have a look at the third one, which is drive, which is motivation. Because once you know where you go and once you communicate that well to your team, you also need the energy to move the whole group, or in this case, in our storyline, the whole ship forward so that you actually reach the destination. So motivation is a key element of leadership. And we are going to concentrate a little bit in our short session here on the non-material motivation that you can give as a female leader. So maybe we just have a look at some of the models that I'm sure you all know, the extrinsic and the intrinsic motivation. So the extrinsic motivation, which comes from the outside, symbolized by this little S, which stands, which is the A in Kita. Kita stands for kick in the ass. So that's the sort of motivation where you persuade, where you threaten, where you push, but you don't really look at what does my little ass actually want. So the intrinsic motivation, which is symbolized here by the carrot, means you as a leader look what would be good for the subordinates. So what would be a benefit? What would be seen as a benefit? And it's very important that you know it's not the same as what you perhaps see as a benefit for you. So this is why you really have to know your team members in order to find out what would be the carrot, what would be the motivation which comes from the inside. And we put together a few examples on the next slide. So the intrinsic motivation can be responsibility, real responsibility, success. So that means you get a task where you actually succeed, room for your own decisions, growth opportunities. So all of these things target the carrot, the intrinsic motivation. The extrinsic motivation, of course, is also important, but not quite so effective. So that would be working climate. It would be your own leadership style, social benefits, compensation. I put down the coffee cup just to remind you of the of some of the elements of the extrinsic motivation once you take it away. To make that clear, sometimes in companies you have free coffee, free muesli, free water, and then there is a saving, a budget saving wave, and it's all taken away. All the muesli and the free water and the coffee is taken away, the extrinsic motivation. And that results in immediate dissatisfaction. So as a leader, we have to know some of the things that we offer, like a coffee, free coffee, might not motivate the people a lot more, but the moment you take it away, it is a total dissatisfactor. And you may know this in the BPW world. I know this story from club presidents, that the end of the year party is always a huge discussion. That date doesn't fit, whatever doesn't fit, and it's always a lot of work. And one club president told me that one year they said they're just not gonna do it. It's complicated. And the moment they communicated, you're not going to have an end of the year party this year, it became an immediate dissatisfaction. So why can we not have it? So that's one of the things that we have to remember. Some things we might give do not motivate very much, but when you take it away, it's a very negative effect. So here are some of the things that you can do. If we look at the next slide. Costs you nothing to create a positive and constructive atmosphere, to show respect, real respect, and to build confidence in your team members. Then the next point is listen actively for verbal clues and watch carefully for nonverbal ones, which means it takes us right back to communication. Communicate, ask questions, give feedback, give recognition, but not only once a year during the yearly review talk. Do it as often as you can, and it has to be genuine. And the next point is be prepared to change the perspective. Like I said, your carrot might not be your team member's carrot. So you have to look at things from different angles. And the last one is give guidance where and when needed. This is a central element of leadership, that you give the right sort of guidance. If you give too much guidance, it might become a dissatisfactor. If you give too little guidance, people might also be frustrated and not motivated. The question is very often, do men and women have different motivational strategies, or are they motivated differently? We just took one study to, again, it sounds a little stereotypical, but there are some differences. So men tend to be motivated more by things like earnings, the autonomy of work, promotion, especially promotion that is recognized. So titles, you know, which is then on a little plug on the door, success, and also training, further training. Women tend to be motivated more in that study, according to that study, by cooperation, the possibility for good cooperation, the working condition as such, and if they get more money, they often want to have it because they would like to live in a good area, which is very often the family thought behind that as well. Fringe benefits and personal time. Personal time also very often has the idea of I'm also the family manager in the background. So next thing that we want to have a look at is what can you do in a volunteer organization? What can you do if you're a leader at BPW? Number one, you need to know the reasons why your volunteers are joining. There are very many reasons, very many carrots. Maybe to be out of the house, maybe it's a giving back strategy, maybe to meet other people, maybe they're new in town. You really need to know what are the reasons for volunteering. Then the next thing, what is very important is, again, communicate. You as a leader, you have to be available to your volunteers. You have to have time for them, and you have to use the appropriate channel. If one member is totally against WhatsApp, don't send out only WhatsApp messages. So use the appropriate channel. If it's a face-to-face, person-to-person kind of member, then you have to take that time and make a phone call. So that's very important. Show your appreciation. That's same as in the corporate world. And the next point is you have to show your volunteers how they made a difference in a certain project or how they make a difference. This is something that we often find in volunteer organizations as one of the major reasons for joining. They want to make a difference. And then the last one, I'm sorry, not last but one, provide social recognition. Social recognition is, of course, for the individual member, but you as a leader, you need to provide social recognition for your entire organization, for your entire club. On club level, it means you should have a really good relationship to the local press, so that there are write-ups about you. You should have a good relationship maybe to other organizations, so there are joint activities. And through this, you provide the social recognition. So like BPW, great club to be a member with, that sort of thing. And then the last one, point number 6, is have fun. Volunteer work can be very stressful. It's usually an on-top thing with other activities that we have to do. So have fun. Make sure that there are relaxing times, parties, get-together, wine tasting, whatever your members consider fun. But it's a very important element to motivate people to come back and also to do volunteer work. So that was point number 3, motivation, drive. And we continue, Anne, with the next point.
Yes, so leading a team of motivated individuals toward a shared vision requires also guiding that team's progress, the effective use of control. So a good leader needs to steer their team well without demanding too much or stifling initiative. It's really a balancing act. You need to know when to push, when to pull, when to let go. On a sailboat, if you have a clear destination, a reliable compass, and a full sail, you still need a functional rudder, and you need to steer competently towards your destination. So how do you do that? You need to adapt your leadership style to the needs of your followers, not to your preferred style. And you need to ask yourself, how much emphasis do you place on the task? How much relationship support do you have to provide? And what's the readiness or maturity level of your follower? So how can you understand the maturity level of your follower? So this is a well-known model, the Hersey-Blanchard Situational Leadership Model Map. And if you look at the categories of a follower, if you have a follower that's unable and unwilling, you need to be high on task and low on relationship. You need to tell more, direct more, be more instructional, because that's where your follower is at. But if you have a follower that's unable and but willing, then you need to go high on task and high on relationship. You need to sell more and persuade and encourage them more. If you have a follower that's able but unwilling, you can go low on task, but you have to go high on relationship. So you have to get them to feel like they're participating, that they're part of the team. And finally, everybody's favorite follower, able and willing, low task, low relationship. You get to delegate because you actually trust the person that's doing the work. So here is, come on, clicker, a simpler model of this, of the Hersey and Blanchard, where you have a low maturity level, so you have to tell your follower what to do. More competent, less competent, but willing. Then you have to sell. You have to sell the ideas. If you have someone that's high in competence but low in commitment, then you have to get them to want to participate. And finally, high competence, high commitment, then you can delegate. So just some key points to summarize this. You need to identify the category of your followers. You need to adapt your leadership style and behavior to match. Sometimes some leaders can find that difficult. And of course, it's easier to apply for individual followers than for a group. And in volunteer settings, you're definitely going to get a mix of these kinds of participants, of followers. So you need to learn their motivations and their maturity level of your board members and your teams. You need to be clear on what needs to be done and when. You need to follow up regularly in a positive manner because it's volunteer, so it really takes a very positive approach. And finally, everybody loves constructive feedback and encouragement, volunteer or not. So that's a little bit about how you actually need to control the process of leadership so that you can get to the destination you want to get to. Back to you, Connie.
Thank you. So the next central element of leadership we feel is situational awareness. I told you at the beginning that we also see leadership as a process, and sometimes one of the elements is more important than the other. And I would say right now, situational awareness is very, very important for any sort of leader. To go back to our storyline, you can see here in the picture a very responsible captain. He is hitting a storm. He's in rough weather. He took down the mainsail. He's only sailing with the jib. That makes the ship slow. Much slower than if he had full sail, but it's probably the right way to go about such stormy weather, and it will probably reach the destination even though slower. Now, if you are a leader who says, well, you know, the wind and the waves, they don't really harm me, I will go full sail, the weather report is probably fake, it doesn't concern me, then of course you can run aground or you can ruin the ship and the crew. So situational awareness, very, very important for a leader. So if we have a look at some of the things we would like to give you as a tip, tip number one is eyes wide open. The shifting conditions in the external environment for you as a leader is very important to know what they are and in which direction they're shifting. Then the next point is the external risks, but also the opportunities. It's not only risks. Even if we look at the situation right now, it's not only risks, there are also certain opportunities. And that's something that you as a leader have to find out. Where are they? What is it? External risks and opportunities. Then it's not only maybe the external environment that can change, but also behavior of your team members. It's a very important leadership task to see, is there any change? Is there in the behavior of a team member? Lower performance, signs of a conflict. So that is also very important to keep your eyes wide open in that aspect. Then the next thing is the stress level of your team members. This might have nothing to do with work. It might be family related, illness related, but it's important that you as a leader know about it. And of course you find it out through communicating and having your eyes wide open. And the last point is you also have to know, are there changes in myself? So you are also responsible to your self-leadership, because you're also not always the same, and there might be some changes that you need to be aware of, hopefully before others are. So how can you increase your situational awareness? We all have a lot to do. We have full agendas, whether it's face-to-face or now in video chat. So we have a lot to do. And if in addition, possibly one of your leadership weaknesses is delegation, then you really don't have the energy to look at the environment and the behavior of different people and risks and all the rest of things. So we would say the first thing that you need to do is manage and monitor and bypass any sort of distraction, which personally I'm finding much more difficult at the moment that we're online so much. And you have to spend the time sharpening your perception. So time management, basically. You need to know the business trends, all the trends, and you have to get all the information that you need. So that might be one possibility that you can use to just take out the important bits of information that you are offered every day. And the next point is constantly improve and grow your own skills. At the moment, maybe we could say you might have a gap in some digital tools or whatever. So that would be a good opportunity now to do that. And always ask yourself supporting questions like, have I considered all the facts? Do I know where I stand? What can I do? And how can I do it? Then what we also feel is very important that you think psychologically as a leader. So we put down three small elements here to think psychologically. So you as a leader, you should look at the visible, but also the invisible, which means you should see the the explicit, but also the implicit. So that means what is written between the lines, what is the meaning behind what is said, all of those things. And also you have to look at the agenda that is on the table when you are together with other people, but also the agenda that's under the table. So both on and under. Very important leadership skill. And now if we look at leadership in the volunteer organization, what does situational awareness mean in your volunteer organization? Be aware of changes in the field. There might be new organizations which attract your members. They might have similar visions, similar goals, so you have to be aware of that. Then the next point is that you have to think about, is the vision of my organization still a trend that attracts volunteers? Is it still a social topic? And the next point is, are there changes in the wider setup of your own organization? For example, is there a new board? Are there new clubs? Is there a new vision? So all of these things belong to situational awareness, which is in our view, one of the central elements of leadership. And over to Anne for our point number 6.
So many years ago on there was written on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, know thyself. So leadership means self-awareness, because without self-knowledge of your strengths and your weaknesses, you're effectively blind to your ultimate fate as a leader. Leaders who know themselves well and demonstrate personal integrity are able to command the respect of their team and get their goals reached. So it's like respected sea captains. They will not shy away from the burden of responsibility, and they won't ask their crew to take risks that they wouldn't take. They're always the last ones off the ship. However, self-awareness, it's a lifelong journey of personal development. It's not something we are going to cover in a webinar, but let's start with some important questions to ask yourself. What's important in your life? What motivates you? And what should not happen? What disturbs you? So these are important questions to ask yourself and to think about, and to constantly update and reflect, because life stages can make you change also what's most important and where you are in your life. So we have to pick one important area to think about in the self-development, because there's many, many things you can do: courses, questionnaires, trainings, reading. But we picked the exercise of values, okay? Because identifying your values are a challenging and very important exercise. Maybe some of you have done it already, but it's helpful to refresh from time to time. Because your personal values are a central part of who you are and who you want to be. And you can use your values as a guide to make the best choice in any situation. And when you're in a situation where many options are possible, your values can guide you in the right direction. So for those of you who haven't or want to do it again, a values exercise, you can just Google a list of values and then take some time to look them over and to select the ones that are important to you and to narrow down the ones that are most important. So once you've done that, once you've identified your main values, you can find out how your values translate to your leadership style and how they influence your decision making. And it's also important to know the values of your organization and your team members, because when you do that, you can make sure that you all are in alignment, and it's easier to remain true both to your own values, but also to your organizational values. And this holds true in volunteer organizations, like all the other elements that we talked about as well. To know your values, to learn the values of your board members, and to promote the values of BPW or whatever organization you're a part of, so that as a leader, your vision is there to remind everybody what the values are. So this wraps up the 6 elements of the leadership compass. We'll just summarize it for you.
Yes, and I just looked at the chat box, and of course the captain is a she, and she has vision. This is the #1 thing. She has a great compass and she has vision. That's #1. And number 2?
Number 2 is communication. So listen to others, speak with clarity, and foster open dialogue.
And she has the energy to motivate the team and to motivate herself, to have the motivational strategies to reach the goal.
She has control, so she adapts her leadership style to her followers' needs.
And she has the situational awareness that she needs to weather a storm.
And finally, self-awareness. So be as self-aware as you can and learn as much about yourself as you can.
So this was, of course, a very lecture-like, but we still would like to conclude and give you a take-home message, and then we may still have a little bit of time for some discussion. So we would suggest that you continue your personal development through courses, through reading, through webinars like this.
That you look for opportunities to practice your leadership skills, for example, in BPW or other organizations.
And we also strongly recommend, and not only because we are the task for leadership and lifelong learning, we do strongly recommend that you also go to a seminar where you actually meet people, where you can exchange peer experience. We find this very, very valuable to talk to other leaders and to really be present maybe for 1 or 2 days, maybe then continue online. But participating in the leadership training is a very, very effective tool. And of course, it's possible through very, very many organizations.
And if by chance you are interested in hosting a BPW leadership training in your club, please contact Connie. Here's her email address, who's the chair of the BPW Task Force Leadership and Lifelong Learning. And we also have a website at bpw-ll.weebly.com. So you can find out more information, see what some of the past trainings, where they were held, and some videos of the seminar itself. So thank you all. It's been fun to share this with you.
I'm going to bring in a question now from our chat. One of the members who I think may not have audio capability.
Mm-hmm.
So Jaya Ramathan has asked, how do you motivate new leaders in your club?
Well, by encouraging them to get involved, actually. So I think an important part for the president and the board of any club is to encourage members to participate, either on the board. I've also taken success teams, held success teams in our club, or in any of the trainings that we've done, encouraged members to participate, to develop their leadership skills, because it's a fantastic environment to practice in a no-risk way, but you certainly get a lot of challenges. And I've found that the women that have done this, we have several members on the Lake Geneva board now who have been encouraged through success teams, or just or being that were in the leadership training or the PEP courses, that said, yeah, I want to get involved. And I could see them, I've seen them develop and grow. It's really a neat thing to watch.
Maybe I can add that it's particularly important in that case to know why they are joining. It's very important to see what is their inner motivation, what is their inner drive. And of course, like Anne said, the moment you involve somebody actively, and whatever the activity is, this has some certain recognition. It usually works very well with new leaders. But I would stress once more how important it is to communicate to others the value of being a BPW member in order to practice leadership skills. So I always find that this is a very, very important reason to join such a club, where you can actually try a few things out, maybe on a project, or maybe you know, in a smaller club, how valuable that could be to actually train your leadership skills, maybe for the big world later. So just wanted to mention that as the final remark. And
for me, I was delighted actually with this invitation, Anne, because I think one of our frustrations is getting the word out to, and we, you know, encourage communication in BPW big time. So I really appreciate this method of communicating and letting members know about us. We have to work on, you know, what we can do to keep it going. Also, I mean, just lots of questions, but I'm excited actually about the possibilities that are open, and that maybe this this webinar helped us kick off for our new era. So thank you all for being here.
Okay, so we want to thank, on behalf of this program, we want to thank our speakers today, Conny Montague, Chair of the BPW International Leadership and Lifelong Learning Task Force. That's a bit of a mouthful. It's a wonderful task force that's been in operation for some years. And Anne Wood, who is a very active member of that task force as well, and both of them obviously professional trainers and presenters. We want also to thank all of you, our viewers and participants who have joined us in this webinar today. We thank also those who will be viewing this online in the recording. And we also ask you to take a look at the other videos in our library, because there are quite a few there now on a wide range of leadership topics. So you can learn quite a lot about being a better and better and ever better leader in BPW. And we also invite you to join our once a month webinars if you want live participation, such as those with us today have had, to have a chance to participate in the discussion, to ask your questions, make comments, and contribute as well. So thanks again to those who are here with us and those out in viewerland. And we hope to see all of you, and maybe also in person sometime soon. Bye for now.